Earth. A planet of many peoples, cultures, and delicious foods, inhabited by Earthlings who come in many shapes and sizes. Some are furry, and some are hairless. Some are weak, and some are strong. The planet is brimming with potential. Enter Carthu, a young man who has traveled the world to master martial arts and grow as a fighter. To him, every new day is a day to get stronger, and while he'd rather not fight unnecessarily, sometimes there's just no choice. Along his journey, an evil organization was forming to take over the world, an organization not too dissimilar from the Red Ribbon Army. This group is called the Blue Badge Army. This military power has been attacking towns, killing those who oppose them, and taking over the resources of the world one at a time. In response, the King of the Earth has made multiple statements claiming he would escalate the level of retaliation used against the army should they not stop their evil deeds. This is where Carthu gets involved. Carthu, on his journey throughout the world, has run into and defeated the army on multiple occasions, usually done out of the goodness of his heart and in the hopes of protecting those who can't defend themselves. The people of these saved towns usually reward Carthu with food and resources which help to extend the duration of his journey. This constant dismantling of the biggest threat to world order even garnered the attention of the King of the Earth, who has Carthu brought to him to task him with a mission.
I don't know how you do it, but we need somebody to help us stop the Blue Badge Army before we're forced to take more extreme measures.
The look in the king's eyes is extremely serious. A tension forms that the adventure-seeking Carthu is completely unused to, so he agrees.
You'll have half a day to get this done. We have no more time to waste.
The plan is a covert raid on the army's main base. Preparations are made and the assault begins. Carthu would have preferred to do this alone, but the king insisted on sending his best soldiers with him. They make their way through the base, eventually reaching the commander's office. The lights are off and the commander is not at his desk. Carthu can tell that something is wrong. He turns around to tell the others to retreat, but when he turns, he sees the soldiers are all bleeding, dead on the floor. Carthu takes his stance and turns to face the attacker, a martial artist who looks very similar to Tao Pai Pai. The fight begins and the two are extremely even. Carthu's training had taken him to the greatest masters in the world. He thought his power was unrivaled, but this man was matching his strength and skill with a little difficulty. The two fight for hours, and their stamina is running low. There is a level of respect and disdain between the two fighters, and the match seems like it would continue until both of them die from exhaustion. But then, the two stop their fight, looking at the watch beeping on the dead soldier's wrist. Carthu's face drops. He breathes in and accepts what's about to happen. So he sits down and begins to meditate. His adversary seems confused by the action, as it clearly wasn't mocking him. But then the alarms of the army base started to go off as well, and he realizes what will soon happen. Unlike Carthu, the nameless martial artist starts to run as fast as he can, but it's no use. The base explodes, hit with a massive bomb. Carthu, the nameless martial artist, and everyone else in the base were killed in an instant. The king thought this was simply the price of a decisive victory, but the conflict wasn't over yet. Another Blue Badge Army base existed, and it was armed with equally powerful bombs. The king of the world's rash actions have led to the end of the Cold War between the two armies. A war of explosives has begun, and it ultimately ends in the destruction of planet Earth. Oh, you didn't realize yet? We're not in Universe 7. Carthu is from the Earth in Universe 6. With the Earth destroyed, our story moves to the afterlife. Carthu has accepted his death, and in life had been a good person, good enough to catch the eye of Kami. The god of Earth meets Carthu in the afterlife and apologizes to Carthu, saying he should have done more to protect the planet, something Carthu ended up trying to do instead. Kami continues and tells Carthu that he used his privileges as a divine being to grant Carthu an afterlife wish, excluding returning to life, of course. Carthu, without hesitation, asks if he can get stronger in the afterlife, and Kami nods, curious what direction this idea is heading. Carthu smiles. He realizes that his journey doesn't have to end here. It could just be beginning. So Carthu asks Kami to give him a place to train to get stronger. Kami laughs, I should have expected as much. And so he talks to the Universe 6 Enmadayo, who points to the massive road to his right. He tells Kami to take Carthu to the Serpent's Path. There he can train with Kaio-sama. Kami nods and brings Carthu to the Serpent's Path. Carthu's eyes bulge as he sees how long the winding path is. I have to run down all of this to get to Kaio-sama? Kami laughs again. No. Kaio-sama's planet is right above us. It used to be at the end of the Serpent's Path, but he had to move it because food deliveries took far too long. Carthu looks up at the planet, excited to start his eternity of training. He bows to Kami, thanking him for his help, and Kami bows back, saying he wishes they had met in life. With that, Carthu jumps towards the planet. The gravity instantly weighs on Carthu, making even the slightest movements difficult. He stomps around the planet in search of Kaio-sama, and unfortunately for Carthu, Champa hadn't reduced the size of this Kai's planet like Beerus did to Universe 7's King Kai. It wasn't as large as Earth, but large enough to be a hassle. Luckily, Kaio-sama sensed Carthu on his planet and ran over to him. He says that was fast, then looks around and asks Carthu where his pizza is. Carthu explains that he's not a delivery guy, he's here to train. Kaio-sama says that his outfit makes a lot more sense now, but asks if Carthu has run the Serpent's Path yet. Carthu shakes his head, confused as to why he would since the planet was at the front of it. Kaio-sama then yells at Carthu, saying he only will train him after he's run the Serpent's Path, and throws the young human warrior off his planet. He begins his run along the path, and with it begins his training. An eternity of strength to be gained lies ahead of him, an eternity to improve and surpass everyone who faces him in the afterlife, an eternity of doing what he loves, or at least he thought it would be an eternity. Over 100 years pass, and everything seems to be going normally in Universe 6's afterlife. Training with Kaio-sama, Carthu has become the strongest human by far, and he even learned the Kai's secret technique, going as far as perfecting it. In the middle of a set of one-armed push-ups, something changed, but he couldn't tell what. Kaio-sama looks at Carthu and gasps. Carthu's halo was gone. Carthu stands up and starts patting his head frantically. He's confused as to what's happened. Kaio-sama quickly scouts the galaxy and realizes that Earth has been restored to the way it was the day before the explosives went off. You see, Beerus had just used his wish on the Super Dragon Balls to restore the planet. Kami arrives on Kaio's world and quickly takes Carthu. They've been given a second chance, but they have to hurry back to Earth to save the planet before war can break out again. Kami teleports them from Emmadile's office to the lookout. Carthu then jumps off the lookout and flies directly to the Blue Badge Army's base. On his way, he throws a few key blasts at the secondary bases, destroying the explosives hidden there. Then he arrives at the main base and sees the martial artist he fought over a century ago, who takes his fighting stance once again, but Carthu sighs. He blitzes past the mercenary, simply saying, "You're not a threat anymore." The mercenary hits the floor in shock. Carthu uses his power to destroy the explosives remaining at the main base, and he picks up a nearby phone to call the King of the World's office. He informs them that the threat has been handled and tells the king to look outside. By the time the king and his staff make it to the window, Carthu is throwing the military arsenal into the air and destroying it with key blasts. They were just as responsible for what happened as the Blue Badge Army were. Over the 100 years being in the afterlife, Carthu used his time not only to hone his skills, but his mind. Not in terms of education, but his thoughts on violence, such as war. Martial arts is a demonstration of power garnered through rigorous training and discipline, while war is simply a play for power and dominance. War used the good of science to create destruction and leave death in its wake. Even the mercenary, who fought for his own gain, had more honor in combat than any wartime general or leader, hiding in their fortified buildings. War would no longer occur on this planet, with Carthu there to protect it. Carthu inadvertently became the protector of Earth, and to cultivate future generations of martial artists, he opened up a school to teach his skills to others. He founded Carthu's Dojo. Meanwhile, in Universe 6, Champa continued to be extremely lazy and didn't even visit Earth after Beerus restored it for him. Over a year passed and the Tournament of Power has come and gone. Carthu felt as if something had happened, but couldn't tell what. Being erased was painless, and it felt as if no time had passed at all between erasure and revival. That same day, Earth received a visit from the god of destruction, Champa. He was in search of two things: delicious foods and powerful fighters. Universe 7 showed Champa that Earthlings could be of some use in future tournaments, perhaps more so than some of his weaker fighters. The search led him to none other than Carthu, the strongest fighter on Earth. To be sure of Carthu's power though, he had one thought: a sparring match. Carthu could tell that Champa was no ordinary foe, so he took his fighting stance and launched an attack. Champa easily dodged all of Carthu's punches, kicks, and ki blasts, so he knew what had to be done. He breathed in and breathed out. Kaioken. The Kai of Universe 6 had also manufactured a Kaioken, remarkably similar to the technique created by Universe 7's King Kai. They even shared a name. Champa instantly recognized the technique because of his encounters with Goku. This made him shudder for a second, but Vados informed him that there was no god form under that Kaioken, which meant Carthu was a long way from Goku's level. The two continued their fight, but the gap in power was still extraordinary. Carthu jumped back and laughed. "I thought I was as strong as I could get, but even my best wouldn't be enough for you. That doesn't mean I won't try though." Carthu took another breath in and calmly uttered, "Kaioken times 1000. Carthu's aura exploded, larger than it was before, and his power skyrocketed. For every year on Kaio's planet, Carthu vowed to increase the multiplier by 10, and he was dead for 100 years. Before getting Super Saiyan, Goku went from a max of Kaioken times 4 to times 20 in a matter of days, so this actually isn't as unlikely as you may think. Carthu is ready to face Champa, but Champa tells him to stop. Next time there's a universal tournament, Carthu would be invited. Carthu isn't sure what he means by that, but he's glad the conflict was over. A Kaioken times 1000 wasn't something he could maintain for very long after all, and even if he could, it probably still wouldn't be enough to beat Champa. After Champa left Earth, Carthu let out a sigh of relief. There was no way he could have beaten the God of Destruction, so if he wanted to, the Earth could have been destroyed once again. As Carthu ponders what he should do next after learning the universe is so vast, Kami uses telepathy to communicate with him. He tells Carthu to make his way to the lookout, so Carthu flies over as quickly as he can. Once he arrives, Kami explains the role of the gods in the universe, the hierarchy of them, and how the God of Destruction is there to balance creation with destruction. This was all well and good, but Carthu knows Kami could have told him that over telepathy. So what was the real reason he called Carthu to the lookout? Kami understands and tells Carthu that something is amiss in the world below. He can't tell what specifically, but something in nature itself was just wrong. Carthu asks what they should do, and Kami tells him he'd have to train to make sure he's ready for this threat. It could strike at any moment. Carthu thought to himself, "It? Is this some kind of monster or something?" If this were the neighboring universe, maybe that would have been the case. However, this was Universe 6, and no artificial life forms were being created to fight Carthu. Something potentially more terrifying was coming. Deep in the mountains, there was a stretch of land that seemed uninhabited and potentially even uninhabitable, but that didn't stop one man from living there. You see, the Blue Badge Army had their own scientist, but unlike Jiro from Universe 7, who was obsessed over androids and artificial life forms, this man sought nothing more than technological advancement. Anything that existed in the world currently, he sought to make it even better and more efficient than it already was. That's why when Champa came out of the sky, an alien casually coming to visit their insect-ridden world, he saw the potential to gain vast power from other worlds. This is where the disruptions of nature come into play. Using his already existent knowledge of the universe and planet locations, most of which he discovered with his improved version of the telescope, he was ready to make a quantum relocation device. In layman's terms, a teleporter. However, this scientific teleportation relied on folding space and creating two connecting wormholes to cover the distance, thus causing the natural balance of Earth to be upset in a way Kami could sense. The Doctor sought vengeance for the dismantling of the Blue Badge Army. While he didn't care for world domination, being on their side gave him the financial support required to continue his research and innovations. Now, all he had was their hidden stores of money that the army had left behind. As the Doctor made his way from planet to planet, Carthu was training on the lookout with Kami, but the god feared that this wouldn't be sufficient for him to grow in a short period of time. Kami told Carthu that he'd have to train for at least 2 years on his own, using the principles of ki control that Kaio-sama and himself had instilled in the proud human warrior. Carthu questioned if they even had a year to spare, let alone 2 years, but Kami told him that there's a place he can train for a year that only requires a single day. Carthu looks confused, and Kami leads the mortal inside his palace and down to the room of spirit and time, where 24 hours outside would be a year inside. This would be their only hope to fight whatever was coming their way. As 48 hours passed, the doctor found himself on another world, this one appearing to be very urban in design, and he asked around about their technology and culture. Eventually, someone tells him of a very interesting legend, a legend that, if true, could get him his revenge once and for all. Carthu exits the Room of Spirit and Time after spending 2 years within it, and he comes out stronger than ever, but not as strong as Kami thought he'd be. However, Carthu assures him that he's learned a few new tricks while in there to make up for the raw strength that Kami couldn't sense. Carthu asks if anything changed out here, and Kami tells Carthu that nature has stopped being disrupted. However, for a brief moment, an overwhelming presence was on the planet, and then it vanished without a trace. Even with the ability to see the world below from the lookout, Kami couldn't find what had come to their world, but it couldn't be good. Carthu looks to Kami and says he'll go down to the surface. Hopefully he can find it before it pops up again. As he does, Kami could sense Carthu's power, even the power he was suppressing, and the force he sensed on the planet while Carthu was gone far outmatched him. What could he be planning? As Carthu lands on the surface, he can feel that something is amiss. Someone is hiding nearby, waiting to strike. Carthu lets out a powerful ki to knock down all of the trees surrounding him, allowing him to use his eyes since ki sense clearly wasn't helpful here. No more hiding. If you're looking for a fight, then just face me. The hidden being smirked in the shadows and stepped out, revealing himself to be none other than the legendary assassin of Universe 6, Hit.
I'm sorry, but I've been hired to take you out.
Hit begins to walk towards Carthu, and Carthu thinks to himself, hired? By who? There was no time to think about that, because in an instant, Hit went from slowly approaching Carthu to being right in his face and striking. As Carthu was sent flying back, he realized that this wasn't someone he could hold back against. Carthu takes in a deep breath, bracing his body and pulling his ki into himself. When he exhales, his ki is no longer detectable. Carthu, using his fight with Champa as reference and the principles of ki control that Kaio-sama and Kami taught him as a base, was able to replicate the power that Champa used against him. Without even knowing its name, Carthu had tapped into God Ki. Unlike a Saiyan though, God Ki doesn't physically transform Carthu. Saiyan biology is just more tailored towards transformations than any other species. This is why the gods don't have a base form, except for the god of destruction and training, Toppo, who has some random form that no other god of destruction seems to have. But that's a different topic. Back to the fight though, Hit begins to attack again, and once again Carthu loses track of the assassin as he closes in. Somehow he's closing the distance between them instantly. Is it teleportation? Even if it's not, it uses the same basic principle. I just have to predict where he'll be before he teleports there. So, Carthu and Hit begin to trade blows. One attack for another, Hit and Carthu are exchanging each and every attack, but it's clear that Hit still has the advantage here. Carthu smirks and realizes he'll have to go all out for real. The air begins to crackle around them, and Carthu powers up using Kaio-sama's technique, the one similar to the Kaioken of Universe 7, ramping it up to 100 times. He knows he can handle 100, but 1000 might be pushing it, so he'll slowly ramp up from there if he has to. Hit smirks again, and his mind flashes back to the time he fought Son Goku. But he had a job to do, and he was already prolonging it for his enjoyment. Hit takes his hands out of his pockets, ready to use his killing technique, but before he can use it, a voice screams out for them to knock it off. The voice belongs to none other than Champa. The god of destruction was alerted of their battle by Vados and immediately came to Earth to see what was going on. Hit says he was hired to assassinate Carthu, but Champa tells Hit he's gonna have to decline that job since Carthu is a part of Universe 6's next team should another tournament of power come up.
No, no, no!
A voice echoes in the distance and a vehicle can be heard making its way over to them as it does. Out of the vehicle emerges the doctor of the Blue Badge Army, and he tells Hit that he has to kill Carthu or else he won't receive his payment. Carthu instantly recognizes the symbol on the doctor's hat and asks if he was planning on using the Blue Badge Army's reserves to pay Hit. The doctor replies that of course he was. What of it? Carthu can't help but let out a little chuckle. When I destroyed the army bases, I apparently got all their reserves as well. All the money and treasure that they had hidden away are just dust now. Hit looks back to the doctor with a furious glare, and it seems like he's about to end him. But before he can, Champa uses a Hakai to destroy the doctor. It is his job as god of destruction to destroy all threats to the universe, of course, so causing issues for their fighting team should count towards that. Champa then looks to Hit and tells him that whatever the doctor was willing to pay him, he'll double it so long as Hit talks to him before any assassination attempts are made. The assassin tells him to triple it, and then they'll have a deal. The god of destruction begrudgingly accepts. He tells Vados to prepare for them to leave, but she was busy examining Carthu. She tells him that it's very impressive that he learned God Ki on his own, and to look out for training partners that'll be sent his way in the near future. Lord Champa wants to ensure that all the fighters of Universe 6 are up to snuff. With that, the angel, god, and assassin leave the planet, and Carthu has something to look forward to in the near future. On their way to drop off Hit, Champa asks why he didn't use his assassination technique from the start or the time cage. He could have ended it immediately if he had. Hit simply ignores the question, but if he had answered it, it would be because Carthu reminded him of someone else that he'd rather fight than kill. Someone that he might even consider a friend. After meeting the god of destruction Champa and surviving his encounter with the assassin Hit, Carthu assumed life would return to normal, and it did for some time, focusing on keeping Earth's peace as well as training his students to do better to defend themselves was a simple life, but it made Carthu happy. However, a simple life was not guaranteed for Carthu, especially with Champa desperately looking to increase his universe's chances of winning another tournament of power. So one day, Carthu is visited by Champa and Vados again. They say the time has come to train with the other combatants from their universe to fix any teamwork issues and find general weaknesses. Carthu doesn't really have a choice in the matter, so Vados takes Carthu to a barren planet that will be perfect for uninterrupted training. Once they arrive, Champa tells Carthu to wait here as the others arrive, and without another word, Champa and Vados leave the planet. Carthu would have preferred that Champa stay around and help with their training too, especially since he had some questions about his imperfect version of God Ki, but he assumes there must be a reason for them leaving. Training with the strongest fighters in the universe should be more than enough for now at least. It would be a short wait for Carthu before someone else arrives on the planet. Out of the spaceship comes a small man in some strange armor Carthu has never seen before. It's of course the Saiyan, Cabba, who has arrived. Carthu goes to greet the Saiyan, but before he can, Cabba takes a fighting stance. Carthu is taken aback by the sudden jump into combat, but this is a person from a culture he's unfamiliar with, so it is possible that this is normal for him. Carthu takes his stance in retaliation, and there's a silence before the battle begins that is only broken by Cabba saying that he won't let a villain destroy this planet. Carthu drops his stance and looks confused. I'm not a villain. But it's too late to change Cabba's perception of the situation, and he strikes Carthu while his guard is down. Carthu pulls in his ki to activate his imperfect God Ki and retaliates. The two begin to trade blows, and the battle begins. Eventually, Cabba realizes he'll need more power to take on Carthu, and he transforms into Super Saiyan 2. Carthu smiles and activates Kaioken times 100, as that will be all he needs to overcome Cabba's power. Before Carthu can end the fight and explain that there's a misunderstanding, a stray blast zooms across the battlefield, separating the fighters. Carthu drops Kaioken, and Cabba returns to his base form, completely exhausted. Carthu turns to see two women who are, of course, Caulifla and Kale. Caulifla didn't care about catching a criminal, but she was promised they were strong, and she's happy to not be disappointed. Caulifla tells Cabba to stand down and that she's taking over this fight. Carthu tries to explain that this is a big misunderstanding, but Caulifla interrupts him and says she knows a guy who has a similar technique that multiplies power, and she wants to test herself against it. Carthu just accepts it for what it is and gets ready to fight. Caulifla turns Super Saiyan 2, and Carthu activates Kaioken times 100 again. The difference here is Caulifla is stronger than Cabba, and because of that, she's dead even with Carthu. The two fight for a while, and Carthu feels like this is actually working as training, but eventually he'll have to make it known that he's not the villain here. So with one more power-up, Carthu increases the multiplier to 200 times Kaioken, a gap Caulifla simply cannot overcome. Without hesitation, Carthu gets behind Caulifla and knocks her out. He turns to Cabba to explain what's happening, but it's clear he already has his hands full with something else. Kale Kale is beginning to lose control. Seeing Caulifla defeated so easily has enraged Kale. While she does have better control of her power since the tournament, she's still a ways off full mastery, especially when Caulifla is in harm's way. Carthu can sense the power emanating from Kale and immediately knows it's on a different level from the other two. Cabba screams to Carthu that she'll kill him, and Carthu doesn't doubt it. Quickly, he activates his Kaioken times 1000 and hopes he'll be able to maintain it, and hopes it'll even be enough. Kale and Carthu begin to fight, and while Carthu is holding a small lead at first, Kale is quickly catching up and even gaining a lead. Carthu screams down to Cabba that he needs to help. If he's really worried about this planet, then she's more likely to destroy it than him. Cabba doesn't fully trust Carthu, but he doesn't really have a choice here either. If they don't calm Kale down soon enough, then the planet will be lost, and them along with it. Even with Cabba's help, there's just too much of a gap for them to overcome. Carthu considers going past the 1000 limit he set for himself, but he's never successfully pulled off anything beyond 1000 in training with God Ki, so it could kill him, but she could as well. Carthu begins to power up. The pain across his face is clearly visible to everyone present, but his power is increasing slowly. If he keeps this up, then he'll get the power he needs, but at the cost of his life. Carthu begins to utter the words, Kaioken times 10,000. But before he can finish, Caulifla appears in front of him. She begins to yell at Kale, telling her to cut it out and how she could have killed them all. This immediately snaps Kale back to her senses. Instead of returning to base form though, the power she let out is pulled into herself, and her Super Saiyan 2 form emerges as it did in the Tournament of Power. Caulifla tells her to remember this feeling. She needs to learn to access this power, not the Berserker form. Carthu is exhausted, but he can tell that the fight isn't over just yet. He stands up to fight, but collapses before he can even raise his fists. Exhausted on the ground, Carthu tells the Saiyans that they've won this one. Cabba says that he's still bringing Carthu in for threatening this planet, but Carthu just laughs. You haven't figured it out yet, Space Cop? Carthu points up to where Vados and Champa are hovering over top the battlefield. Cabba doesn't understand what's going on, and Champa makes his way down to the surface. Champa then explains his master strategy to get them to train together. He told Cabba there was a villain, Caulifla there was someone stronger than her, and knew Kale would follow Caulifla regardless, so it was easy enough to manipulate this event. And you knew training is something I wouldn't pass up on, so you were just honest with me. Champa nods excitedly and proudly. Cabba gets uncharacteristically angry at Champa for recklessly endangering them and this planet, but Carthu tells Cabba to calm down. Champa wouldn't let his precious combatants kill each other, and that's why he was watching. Vados makes her way to each of the fighters and heals them with her staff. She adds that this also helped them see who's the strongest among their fighters and where the improvements need to be made. A fight where no one can hold back. Now that they have that information, normal training can proceed in the future, but that's enough for today. Cabba, Caulifla, and Kale enter their ship and leave. Vados and Champa take Carthu back to Earth. On their way back, Vados asks what Carthu thinks he needs to improve. He tells her that his ki control needs to be perfected so he can increase the Kaioken even further and truly master God Ki. The 1000 times Kaioken gap when using God Ki just won't be enough if these other universes are truly as strong as they are saying. Vados smiles because that is the right answer. When they arrive back on Earth, Vados tells Carthu that he'll be training with her going forward. Ki control is an angel's specialty after all. Carthu bows, grateful for all their help, and they leave his world. Carthu throws up a peace sign as they fly away. Training would continue for Carthu after this, but conflict would not. At least not until we learn more about the next Tournament of Power. Thank you so much for 300,000 subscribers. Like and subscribe if you haven't yet, and thank you so very much for watching.